investments, you will get our podcast here, right? That's number one. But what I want to share with you today is specifically picking up from the live that we did yesterday, where I was showing you how now you can use Claude code specifically to create the skills that essentially what it does is, let me show you what we did. If you want to look back at our prior to today's lives, they're on YouTube on my live streams. So you can kind of check it out how I kind of built it from scratch, right? For the folks that did watch the last 2 days, I'm going to pick it up right from yesterday, which essentially I just made some edits to the skills yesterday based off the first run through. So now what it's doing is I'm feeding it the text file, which is the transcript that I recorded my podcast with, right? And now it's spitting out an entire video description for my podcast on affordable housing and real estate investing so that it is optimizing all of the verbiage, right? So you can kind of see right here in the beginning, it says, hey, this is the best podcast for affordable housing investments. And then the second most important section is this section called Common Questions This Podcast Episode Answers. And this allows me to say, hey, what is the CDFI? How does it fund affordable housing development? So this question is phrased in such a way for someone, if they were to ask a large language model like ChatGPT or Gemini, they would possibly increase the chances of my podcast showing up as the potential answer for that question, which essentially, if you have been familiar with the past ways of how we used to research, like by going to the library and looking at an encyclopedia and trying to learn about something, you're essentially becoming the equivalent of the encyclopedia for whatever topic, whatever mission, whatever niche that you're in. So this is why it's so important. But what's more important is that this used to take me 2 to 3 hours, probably every single week, easily. Now, what it does is I'm feeding it the transcript and it's giving me a very consistent way of saying, like, hey, here's all the stuff, here's all the key takeaways. Boom, here's a little quick call to action. And then here's all my notes for Apple and Spotify. And then what it also does is I ask it, hey, go find me the clips that I should be using to create my clips from that best optimizes for GEO and LMO, right? Generative engine optimization, which is GEO, or language model optimization. And I'm asking it to go through my content for it to come up with these descriptions that allows me to optimize my skills specifically so that I improve my chances of my content showing up on ChatGPT or large language models. These are all the items that you have to figure out to see, hey, is this applicable to me? Is this what I want to do with my content? Is this how I can get my content out there? If you believe, right, I certainly do, that how people used to get information, right, a transition from reading books to going to the library, do some research, looking at encyclopedias, to essentially Googling things, right? But now it was going to ask ChatGPT or these large language models these very straightforward questions like, hey, what can I do? How can I do it? And now what I'm doing is come up with these clips, and then it gives me the video descriptions that specifically breaks down how is my video description for this clip that I'm going to publish on YouTube, YouTube Shorts, and LinkedIn that optimizes for that generative engine optimization, right? So it'll come up with, hey, what is this clip answer? It answers, what is the CDFI, right? Why do large banks give capital to CDFI since they're lending to nonprofits directly, right? These are all the clips. And then I will also have a different item that says Instagram, TikTok, right? So for my audience at Instagram, TikTok, I'm going to use a different description, right? Different hooks, right? This is what I want to kind of pull out. The only thing I would change here is probably I'll say, hey, my CTA needs to be DM me the word blah to get to full episode, right? That's what I want to do for updating this stuff. Hook, one loan, multiple projects. So this could be the new hook, right? For Instagram clip, right? It's different because it's on a different platform. So I need to be a little bit more creative with how I create that copywriting. So this is going to be something different, right? That I'll be testing out going forward. And you can kind of see, right, all this stuff. Now, this has allowed my editor, Pia, on my team to say, okay, this is easy. Instead of her using her time to figure out like, hey, which clip should I be doing? I'm just going to take what Claude told me and just put it together. So you can kind of see, okay, let's take a look at this one. Yeah, so now you can see that she kind of came up with all these clips where it's just like, hey, why nonprofit finance fund? What big banks can't? Why don't want big banks just fund nonprofit directly with expertise that makes nonprofit lending possible? Right. And now these are the titles that I can say, hey, I want to use this title for this one, right? So now I can look at it and say, well, what's going on over here? Does this make sense? What is the CDFI and why do big banks fund them? So I just take that title now. Why do they, right? Sean, 2, 1. Why do they rely instead of it rely? Alone. Hmm. Take that risk and a deep dive. Yeah, so that's a good one. Let's see that fire one. Why? What is a nonprofit finance fund? How does it work? Boom. So that's it. Right now, it's coming up with all these different requirements, right? And I want to promote, probably starting with Sean too. Let's see what else is going to happen here. Okay. So, what does a flexible loan mean? What flexibility does NFF provide? Unsecured pre-development capital. So you can kind of see, right? Now I'm getting back to my work of just like refining at the very last piece. But the chunk of the work, right? You think about it, the chunk of the work about optimizing all my content. I mean, this stuff is like pretty much it. The only thing I would say is like again, I probably have to change the CTA from above to just be like DM me the word NFF for the full podcast, something along those lines, right? So that's what you have essentially going on here. But this qualified developers in a way with qualified developers. So that's really interesting, right? Not too often can you get an unsecured line of credit. And if you understand how much flexibility that it provides you with your projects and your nonprofit funds, that gives you a little bit more flexibility to get your project approved, have access to the working capital. And if you've seen our most recent podcast, right, where we talked with NHP Foundation, where they actually put together a 75 million corporate bond issuance to give them themselves that flexibility. Now you're seeing how other nonprofit small developers can also get access to that same type of liquidity with a banking partner, right? So you start building that reputation time over time to figure out, is this the right path for me? And how do I start getting ready for something as big as a $75 million bond issuance? Maybe I have to start proving myself with a 2 million or 3 million unsecured line of credit to show that I am responsible, I'm managing the funds well. And these are all the factors that you have to take into account before you make those decisions. All right. So hopefully this is helpful, everybody. I hope you all have an amazing Monday. I'll see you all tomorrow. Hopefully, this is helpful that you actually see how I'm using Claude Skills to apply it towards our podcast for the ultimate purpose of getting more information out there so you can all see what's happening. Have a good one, everybody.